After the December 1941 attack on Pearl Harbor, the Imperial Japanese Navy took close notice of the American salvage operations. They expected that it would take them over 6 months to recover from the surprise attack, but they were wrong. In February of 1942, the Japanese realized that the attack had not achieved the desired results, as the U.S. Navy was damaged but not crippled, and the repair operations were advancing at an alarming pace. With this in mind, the Japanese decided to launch a second raid on Pearl Harbor to finish what they had started months ago. Under the codename Operation K, 2 brand-new Kawanishi H8K flying boats carrying an impressive bomb load were dispatched without escort to bomb the dock. On the cold and dark night of March 3rd, the 2 flying boats breached the U.S. airspace with the enemy on their tails to bomb Hawaii for a second time. Not enough. On December 7th, 1941, a task force of Imperial Japanese Navy aircraft attacked the United States Navy base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Despite alarming warnings that the Japanese were amassing large forces for an unknown purpose, the U.S. did not take the necessary precautions. By that point, the American population had adopted an isolationist posture towards the conflict, but the surprise attack fulfilled President Franklin D. Roosevelt's desire to launch the war in the Pacific and push the country's industry towards the war effort. This time, the people were behind him. While Adolf Hitler believed that Japan's confrontation with the United States would keep the Americans from joining the war in Europe and Africa, Emperor Hirohito and his staff expected that the Germans would keep the British busy enough to allow them to send more troops to India and Asia. However, the alliances did not have the desired effect, but there was no turning back. As the American war machine slowly woke up and accelerated the production of weapons, aircraft, ships, and ammunition, the Philippines, Guam, Wake Island, and other U.S. territories, such as the Aleutian Islands in Alaska, fell under the Japanese regime. Hawaii was next, but the U.S. Army was now prepared and had filled the beaches with barbed wire, firing positions, and trenches to repel the Japanese amphibious assaults. Although Japanese air incursions had stopped, their submarines operated close to the beaches and shelled port facilities in Hawaii and Big Island during the night. However, by February of 1942, the Japanese High Command realized that the Pearl Harbor attack had not achieved the intended results. Despite sinking and damaging over 8 battleships and 10 smaller vessels, the recovery efforts had been able to raise some of them from the bay, and repairs were already underway. The U.S. Pacific Fleet was damaged but not crippled, and the repair operations were advancing at an unexpected pace. The Japanese had estimated that it would take them more than 6 months to be back in action. The Empire knew that its time to rule over the Pacific was running out at an unforgiving pace, and decided to act accordingly. Operation KE-SAKUSEN. Operation KE-SAKUSEN, or Operation Strategy, was conceived by the Japanese High Command as a scouting mission to investigate and analyze the state of the American repair efforts after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Secondary objective was to take advantage of the state of paranoia that had taken hold of the local population and bomb the 1010 dock at Pearl Harbor to further disrupt the salvage efforts. Other objectives included finishing off targets that were left unscratched during the first raid and testing the Imperial Navy's newest aircraft, the Kawanishi H8K flying boats. If everything went according to plan, the Imperial Navy would carry out other raids. However, the key to this strategy relied on the effectiveness of the H8K flying boat. Also called the Type II flying boat, the Kawanishi H8K was a large 4-engine aircraft intended for long-range patrols or bombing missions over the ocean. It had a length of 92 feet, a height of 30 feet, a wingspan of 124 feet, and a maximum crew capacity of 10. The flying boat was equipped with 5 20mm Type 99 machine guns, 5 7.7mm Type 92 machine guns, and the ability to carry either 4,400 pounds worth of bombs or 2 1,800-pound torpedoes. Despite its weight, the Type II had an outstanding speed of about 290 miles per hour, a range of 4,500 miles, and a service ceiling of 29,000 feet. It flew for the first time in January of 1941, and Operation K would be its first combat sortie. Still, only 2 would be available for the March 4th, 1942 operation. The date was specifically chosen because, according to weather forecasts, a full moon would provide clear skies and maximize the pilot's visibility. The 2 flying boats would have to fly overnight without any fighter escort to keep the mission as secret as possible. They would take off from the Marshall Islands and cross over 1,900 miles to land on the remote French frigate Shoals Atoll. Once there, the 2 Type 2 boats would have to await submarine I-23 for a quick refuel, and the Japanese pilots would then fly 310 miles to reach Oahu and fulfill their mission. As the Imperial Navy prepared for the operation, radio communications were kept to the minimum, to the point that no one realized that submarine I-23 had gone entirely silent since February 14th, never to be seen again. Still, Operation K continued as planned. United States perimeter. The 2 men chosen for the operation were seasoned warriors from the elite 801st Kokutai Fighter Squadron. They were Lieutenant Hisao Hashizume aboard Y-71 and Ensign Shosuke Sasao at the controls of Kawanishi Y-72. On March 3rd, the 2 men flew to Wotye Atoll in the Marshalls and were each given 4 550-pound bombs to carry out the mission. After a quick refuel and a moment of prayer and commendation to the Japanese commies, Hashizume and Sasao took off for the French frigate Shoals Atoll. U.S. intelligence observers and codebreakers noted the bomber's deployment and immediately warned the naval authorities at Oahu. Still, no action was taken. As the 2 Japanese pilots got deeper into U.S. territory, thick clouds and fog began to appear. Hashizume and Sasao worried, as those were not the clear skies they were expecting. While the flying boats raced through the ocean high above the skyline, the women's air raid defense picked up the aircraft's signals, and a squadron of fighters was sent to confront them. However, the radars did not work correctly, and as the weather worsened and clouds filled the horizon, the American Warhawks and Catalinas could not spot the enemy. At around 2 a.m., the 2 Japanese aircraft finally reached the coasts of Oahu without encountering any resistance. However, the bad weather had also affected them, and they lost their way trying to approach Pearl Harbor. Meanwhile, the U.S. Army Air Forces and Navy aircraft that were dispatched to intercept the intruders continued their frantic search without any results. Only one thing was certain: the enemies had breached the American perimeter, and they did not know where to find them. Lost at sea. Paranoia soon took hold of the U.S. pilots and the radio men who had picked up the hostile signals. They suspected that the Japanese were about to conduct a second attack on Pearl Harbor, and that was bad news. As the Japanese ventured into the unknown and found themselves surrounded by the thick clouds and fog, Hashizume got desperate and could not see where his partner was, nor the ideal course to reach Pearl Harbor. After waiting a few minutes for the weather conditions to hopefully improve and then approach the target, the nervous Japanese pilot radioed Sasao, ordering him to fly straight north to Pearl Harbor. But Sasao's response did not come. Hashizume attempted to make contact with him a second time, but the result was the same. Either because of radio silence or an unexpected radio malfunction, Sasao turned south, and the 2 aircraft were now heading for Pearl Harbor in 2 different directions. Attacking in tandem was no longer an option, but both pilots still made their runs on the island individually. However, the government blackouts, the weather, and the lack of proper coordination made it extremely difficult for the pilots to spot the desired targets. In the end, Hashizume dropped his 4 bombs on the slopes of Tantalus Peak, landing near a high school facility and causing little damage and no casualties, while Sasao dropped the bombs into the ocean, close to the coast of Waianae. Fearing that they had been spotted, the 2 pilots then turned tails and headed for the Marshalls. Approaching Pearl Harbor. Sasao returned safely to the Marshalls, but Hashizume flew all the way to Jaluit Atoll for emergency repairs, as he had sustained hull damage when he took off from the French frigate Shoals. Although the operation was a total failure, A Los Angeles report stated that Pearl Harbor had sustained heavy damage at the cost of 30 soldiers and 70 wounded personnel. This was false, but the Japanese Navy took it for granted and decided to launch another raid with Hashizume at the helm. However, his flying boat was shot down on March 10th by Brewster F-2A Buffalo fighters near Midway Atoll, and he didn't make it. The failed second Pearl Harbor attack would go down in history as the raid with the longest distance ever undertaken during a two-plane bombing mission without any type of bomber escort. Thank you for watching our video. Please like and subscribe to our Dark Documentaries channels to find more exciting historical content. And let us know in the comments below what you think of this failed second Pearl Harbor attack that indirectly led to the Battle of Midway. Stay tuned.